Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'm Lisa Hook, Vice Chair of the Maine Sports Hall of Fame, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this evening's webinar commemorating 50 years of Title IX. As you well recall, Title IX prohibits gender-based discrimination in any school or education program that receives funding from the federal government. While the law does not mention the word sports, its most well-known effect has been to provide equal opportunity in high school and college athletics. So tonight we'll discuss the progress in athletics over the 50 years since passage of Title IX, as well as where gaps may still exist. Our panelists for this conversation are three very accomplished women whose lives have been impacted by this 1972 law. First, Heather Davis. Heather is currently the athletic director at the University of New England. She was promoted to administration after 7 years as head coach of the UNE women's soccer program and an overall coaching career spanning 19 years. Heather has degrees from Plymouth State College and the University of North Carolina. At Plymouth State, she was an all-region soccer player, and her team made 3 NCAA appearances, including advancing to the national championship game. She also played lacrosse at Plymouth and 1 year while in graduate school at UNC. In that season, her lacrosse team advanced to the national semifinals. Thanks for joining us, Heather. And secondly, Lisa Blais Manning. Lisa is one of the best basketball players to grow up in Maine. She led Westbrook High School to 4 consecutive state championships before accepting a scholarship to Old Dominion University and its dominant women's basketball program. Lisa was captain of the 1985 Monarchs, which won the NCAA National Championship. She returned to Maine and has coached at Scarborough for 20 years. Lisa is also the mother of Christy Manning, who was Miss Maine Basketball in 2010. Thanks for joining us, Lisa. And thirdly, Amy Vachon. Amy is the head coach of the University of Maine women's basketball program. She was a star player at Coney High School, twice named Gatorade Player of the Year, and was also a Miss Maine basketball recipient. At UMaine, she made 4 trips to the NCAA tournament and was a starter on the team that defeated Stanford in the first round. Amy is an equally successful coach, having taken the Black Bears to 6 consecutive America East Conference Championship games and 2 NCAA appearances. She has been named Coach of the Year twice and is in 4 Halls of Fame. Thanks to you, Amy, for joining us. And the final introduction is our moderator, Travis Lazarzek. Travis is a sports writer of the Portland Press Herald and also very accomplished. Travis has been named Maine Sports Writer of the Year 2 of the last 3 years. Travis is going to guide our panel through a wide-ranging discussion, and I'm very excited to turn it over and hear what's in store.
Lisa. In the early days of Title IX, you were a high school basketball player and a college basketball player at Old Dominion. Old Dominion, one of the dominant programs of that era. What did you see as you traveled around the country with your team? Did you see other schools coming around quickly, or was it just, a few pockets of strong players here and there?
It seemed like I didn't see the parity that you see now. Like back then, you could almost pick who was going to win right off the bat. I think, there were a few very dominant schools that got most of the best recruits. You had the Tennessee, you had Louisiana Tech, and Southern Cal with Cheryl Miller and McGee sisters. And so I feel like there were, just a few pockets of really, really good schools back then. And then it was Connecticut's, and now I feel like it's really blossomed in the current day.
One thing that I found interesting about your 1985 Final Four, it's you guys, Georgia, Western Kentucky, and Northeast Louisiana, and that's 3 schools that these days would be considered mid-majors. I don't even think they had the term mid-major in 1985. And 2 of you from the same conference, the Sun Belt, correct? You and Western Kentucky.
Western Kentucky, yeah.
Were those smaller schools just quicker to embrace women's sports, or what did you see in the middle of it?
Yeah, I think it was the players were believing in themselves that they could play with anyone. Back then and even now, I think that when they were setting up the tournaments, they would try to go to a state where they thought, like Texas was supposed to be in the final four. So we played in Austin, Texas, thinking that would draw more people to the game. But actually, Western Kentucky beat them before the Final Four. So the crowd was still decent, but it wasn't what it was. It was there we were expecting because Texas was out. But like I said, even Southern Cal got beat. And I have a tape that one of my teammates from college shared the other day on Facebook with the rest of us. And it was like showing the Final Four, and they showed Cheryl Miller and the McGee sisters in the crowd, just watching now. So, I think that back then teams started to believe in themselves, and they were playing very well in their own conference. And so, things like that happen. If you're not on that night, sometimes you can get beat. So.
You played that Final Four at the Frank Irwin Center right on the University of Texas campus. You said it was a good crowd. Was it a full house? Do you recall what the?
I don't think it was, as full as it would have been because Texas was out. But
Sure.
I honestly, when I'm in that game, I'm focused. I didn't even look in the crowd. My parents were there, but I had no idea where they were. But it's like it's a focus thing. So. I think there were a few empty seats, but not a lot,
Okay. Heather, I'll switch over to you. You played in both Division III and Division I, soccer and lacrosse at Plymouth State, lacrosse at Carolina, so go Heels. What was the biggest difference you saw in the level of play back then?
Well, it really was a luck of fortune for me with the Carolina opportunity. I never wanted to leave anything on the table. And I had 1 year of eligibility. And I thought, I'll go try out. I'll close this door. I'll do my grad school. And it was the second year that program was varsity status. So They were really young, all, first years, sophomores. And the coach thought, hey, a grad student, she'll bring some leadership and some maturity. And so it was really an opportunity that I wasn't expecting, but because it was a very new program, I was able to make the team, and it was a phenomenal experience, but it is a very different world than Division III. I could play, so the level was different. I was one of a few sort of strong players on our lacrosse team at Plymouth because we were a weaker program. But at Carolina, everybody could play, and I think what that really showed was the power of the scholarship opportunities where a coach could really build her team. And the other difference, or the one thing that I really had that was the same, was it was the first time in college and then grad school that I ever played for a female. And my college soccer coach and lacrosse coaches at Plymouth were both women. My college coach at Carolina was a woman. Prior to that, I had only played for men throughout my whole childhood. And it really made a difference and a huge impact on me. But the difference between Division I and Division III athletic models, that's a whole nother webinar.
Yeah, we'll have to have another one for that.
Yeah, I really enjoyed my opportunities at Plymouth to be a multi-sport athlete, which I think is less common at Division I because of the way the seasons are structured. But they were vastly different opportunities.
That's a good point about coaching at the youth and high school level. And I'll ask both Amy and Lisa, what were your coaches when you were growing up in Augusta and Westbrook? Were they men, women? When were the first time you guys were coached by a woman.
Go ahead, Amy. I already spoke.
I was actually fortunate. I had a field hockey middle school basketball coach who were both women. I had a travel team coach growing up that was a woman. My dad coached me in high school, so obviously that. But I was one of the fortunate ones. I mean, Heather's right. We started the coaches association here in Maine last couple summers ago, and that was a very common statement that a lot of the women that are getting into coaching or want to get into coaching right now saw very few, if any, females coaching them as they grew up. So,
yeah. In middle school, I had a woman basketball coach. We actually just started field hockey when I was in middle school, and they got one of the male teachers at the middle school to agree to do it. He knew nothing about field hockey because we hadn't ever played it. But in high school, I had Archie Mnuchin, who was coaching with the boys and then moved over to the girls. But in college, I had a woman, Mary Ann Stanley, who's going to be inducted into the Hall of Fame this year. So
yeah.
Great.
that was great.
But I think Travis, like the coaching, that's a big piece of this Title IX part, is Title IX has just given so many opportunities to girls, in participation in sports, and the numbers are just, I saw today that in 1972, I think 1 out of every 27 girls participated in sports, and now it's 1 out of every 3. So the number of girls that are participating in sports is just grown exponentially, which is amazing. The number of females that are coaching has declined rapidly since Title IX. And so it's a really interesting kind of contrast there.
Yeah, you sent us some stuff today. In 1972, 90% of the coaches coaching girls and women's sports were women. And then there was a sharp decline. And then over the last 20 years or so, it's kind of just hovered at around 40%. In 2019, it was about 41.8%. So while there's more participation, they're not becoming coaches afterward. And, Amy, talk about some of the work you've done over the last couple of years to try to improve that, because just here in Maine, only about 15.8% of the high school girls basketball teams are coached by women.
Yeah, it's a huge issue. And I mean, I think there's a lot of reasons for people might look at this and say, well, that doesn't make any sense. Title IX is supposed to be for, equality, and females should have equal access. And what basically happened was prior to 1972, and I always say this before, I am not anti-male coaching. I think my dad was my coach, one of my best coaches I've ever had. Males are coaches and are amazing, amazing coaches. So this is not anti-male. It's just opportunities for female. And so prior to 1972, women's sports didn't matter. First of all, there weren't a lot of opportunities. And secondly, you weren't going to make any money doing it. So no one really did it. And then Title IX was passed, and all this money started going toward, more opportunities started happening. And the men were like, oh, look, I can coach men or I can coach women. And so there's an extra kind of place they can go there. And so that was one of the biggest reasons why the women, the number of females started, not coaching anymore. And so it's, you saw that graph, it's gone down, it's kind of stayed. We have to do a much better job of encouraging young women and females to coach and working with them, with balancing family life, it's very different, and so, but it can be done. And there are a lot of very successful female coaches out there in all sports that have been successful doing it. And I think the last part I will say about that is another part of that is that as females, we tend to only apply for jobs that we feel that we are 100%, we're going to get it no matter what. And if there's one box on that checklist that we don't think we have, we're not applying for it. And men are exactly the opposite. Like they'll throw their resumes out to anything. and that's a real big generalization. So but it's that's really kind of what we see, and so unless you're really, we as our association, we're trying to give our coaches the confidence, hey, put your name out there, try it. Like, you never know. You don't have to have 10 years of coaching before you try to be a varsity coach. Like, try to put your name out, get experience, do that kind of thing. So that's the tip of the iceberg, but there's a lot of stuff there.
Heather, at UNE.
Sorry,
go
if I
ahead.
could just jump in too. It's also about like hiring practices and implicit bias, like unconscious bias. And when you talk about in 1972, who were most of the people hiring the coaches? Predominantly male at that time. And we know that there's this subconscious bias in the hiring process that we really have to work against. But like tends to find like, and there's been lots of research out about it that male people in a hiring position are more tendency is to hire men, or women to hire women. I mean, I'll give you an example of a stat about a bias. So in the US population, about 14% of men overall in the population are 6 feet or taller, okay? 14 to 15%. But when you survey the CEOs of Fortune 500s, it's nearly 60% are men above 6 feet tall. Now, if you're above 6 foot tall, are you automatically a better leader or more prepared to lead a Fortune 500? It's just a bias, right? We tend to associate leadership qualities with things that look like that to us. And, back in 72, again, it was mostly men in the hiring position, when they're looking at these jobs. And it's really important that when we're in hiring positions, like as a director of athletics, I'm in a hiring position, to be conscious of any bias that I might have and really trying to find the best person for the job. But Amy's right. I mean, I can tell you on job searches that we've had, the job pools are predominantly male, like overwhelmingly male for any job, any position, any male, female sport, whatever is it. And I think women do really hold back from putting themselves forward. And there's been some studies that share that mentoring can be a huge factor in trying to get people to apply for jobs or to build skills so that they are prepared, for those executive level jobs. And I think the work being done in coaching associations like the one Amy's associated with that offer these mentoring opportunities or these, symposiums or training or growth, it really does help prepare women to feel more confident putting their name out there.
Sure.
And I would just say just exactly what Heather was saying. I think another piece of that is trying to, if you're in a position of hiring, is reaching out and doing your homework to try and find people who might not, like doing phone calls. Hey, do you know of a female, or do you know of a Black woman or minority, or that kind of, reaching out and not waiting for them to apply, because the research shows we're not applying as much as others are, and so I think that's a big piece of that as well.
That kind of leads into my next question for you, Heather. Is at UNE, 6 of the head coaches of your 11 women's sports are female, as are your 2 strength and conditioning coaches and your head trainer. So you're getting good applicants in that pool, but it sounds like a majority of the applicants, when you have an opening for one of those jobs, are men, even for the women's teams positions, I should say.
Yes, absolutely. Any job posting we have historically has just been predominantly stacked with male applicants. But the female applicants that are coming to us are really high quality, and that's really supports what Amy's saying, that, a lot of women won't apply for a job unless they feel really confident they're going to be a top candidate. They don't really take a risk or a gamble as often as a male might. So we've been really fortunate with having super talented and strong applicants, men and women, across the board. But the job searches do lend that way. And a successful search cannot happen without a robust, deep pool. you know, so it is building your applicant pool. And, you know, to Amy's point, we work really hard on that with trying to recruit for the pool or spread the net in diverse pockets, or asking folks, hey, do you know a great person? You know, because sometimes someone just needs to be reached, like, hey, consider it. What do you know, put your stuff in. That goes, you know, back to the mentoring piece, you know, where you have someone in your corner.
Sorry. No, I think, Heather, that's such a great point, because one of the statements or quotes is, an invitation to everyone is an invitation to no one. So one of the things that happens a lot in our group is that we have a Facebook page, and it will be a post that says, hey, such and such school is looking for a JV coach. Anyone know of anyone? And it's like crickets, you know? And so it needs to be like, okay, Amy, I'm going to call Courtney and say, Courtney, you live in Saco. I heard they have a job. You should apply for it. You know, like, you have to be very intentional with what you do, because it's, again, if unless you are, it's that I'm not good enough. They're not talking about me. I can't do it. That kind of thing. So
I wonder if a lot of it is like time consuming and time related. You know, if you have a different job, if you're not in the school system, it's a lot harder to get in there as well, because you just don't have, some people work until 5 o'clock at night, and they know they have to maybe be there for 3 o'clock practice every day, whatever. But I think
and
sometimes
I would agree with you, Lisa. But I would also combat with that, saying the men are in the same situation.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
guys who aren't in the school, I think of the big thing with females is having a family and being home, and have that responsibility falls a lot on females.
Right.
And so I think that's a bigger piece than that. But
when
which
you mentioned that too, when you mentioned that, it made me think of I was coaching freshman girls basketball at Westbrook, and I had my 2-year-old on a backpack at practice. Yeah.
Right. It can be done. It's
it can be done. Yeah.
It's just, it's hard. It is hard.
I'm really concerned about where we are right now. I think the impact of the pandemic has really hit the home hard, and for parents, you know, both gender, any gender, any parent, right? But primarily, I think, you know, if you say who's the primary caregiver, probably more women would identify as that than men. That's a generalization, so forgive me for that, but I think that's probably an appropriate generalization to make. And over the remote learning, the children are at home, people are trying to work and double, you know, work and teach their kids and care for their children and care for the home. I'm a little concerned. I think we're going to see more women leaving the workforce at this time. Well, time will tell, but I think we're going to have to make some really deliberate, intentional efforts to recruit, to support family, to help find balance, whether it's policies at work or attitudes in the workforce. I think it's a time where we have to be super intentional about it and how we lead forward and sort of counter the really tough couple of years we've had.
Amy, when you have your seminars for prospective coaches, what are some of the reasons people are saying why they haven't considered it?
It's confidence, lack of confidence, not thinking we're good enough. It is that mentorship, not having someone, not have ever seen someone wanting to start a family, you know, not knowing if that's going to be possible. The support, administrative support, you know, hoping that they'll have that support. And this isn't specific to females, but I think a lot of coaches in general, parents, you know, and the kind of support you'll get from administration there. I think that's a big concern. I would say those are 4 or 5 of the biggest ones for sure.
I remember talking to you a few years ago, Amy, and you had said you went to grad school and you had really zero interest in coaching at that time. What flipped for you? Because now, you know, it suits you.
yeah, now here I am. Yeah, I mean, I think for me though, I think it was just the path that I was on. I mean, I grew up in a coaching family. I'd been around basketball my entire life. From Maine, went to school at Maine. I just felt like I needed a break from Amy Vachon, the basketball player, and wanted to be Amy Vashon. Nobody knows who you are. And so I went to North Carolina, went to grad school, and then came back, and I kept, just fighting it. I was like, I'm not going to do it. And I loved it. I was a guidance counselor. I was a teacher. I loved being around kids. And so I just stopped fighting it after a while. So it was more of me being stubborn than anything else, I think.
Not accepting your destiny.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, in April, Mike Lowe and I did a big investigative report on Title IX in Maine college sports. And we found one of the biggest things was a disparity in spending that included money for like assistant coaches, recruiting, things like that. Amy, how often do you have to kind of go in and fight for those things?
I mean, I'll be honest, at Maine, I'm very fortunate. If I need something with our program, our administration is really good with us. I think it's really important. One of the things is important to state is that just because, I'm a female basketball coach and there's a male basketball coach, doesn't necessarily we should be making the same all the time. Right? Like when I came in, my first contract, I had never coached at Division I. Like I should not have been making the same amount as the male coach who had been coaching Division I for 10 years. I mean, that's just it. So it doesn't. Now, when I went back to renegotiate my contract, things had changed, right? Like we were successful. And so our staff, and that's where I went and I said, look, like this isn't right. Like we're successful, and they were really good about it. But I think it's important, like just because I'm a female basketball coach doesn't mean I should be making the same amount of money as Gino or Emma. Like that's not a fair, it's not a fair comparison. I did some research because I was really interested, when Pat Summitt started coaching, her first contract, she made, I think it was like after her first year, her first contract was $9,000. And her kind of peer at that time was John Wooden. Well, John Wooden was making a lot more money. John Wooden had won 11 national championships. Pat Summitt had coached 1 year. So you can't always, it's not fair I don't think, to always compare that,
Right.
But if all is equal, people should be getting paid the same,
Sure.
So back to your question, I've been very fortunate with my position at the University of Maine, where if we need something, we will go ask, and we most usually get it. Now, are we resourced like UConn is, or even like other schools in our conference are? No, we're not. But we understand that. Like I know that where I am, I'm good with that. But yeah, so I think there's just a lot of, nuances with that kind of thing.
Exactly. Lisa, when you were at Old Dominion, were you guys given the same resources as the men's team?
We both practiced in the same facility. The men, however, played in the downtown Norfolk Scope, and we played in our own home gym. But we were okay with that because, I mean, if we played in Scope, it would look like there was nobody there, Although, I mean, we used to get, depending on who we were playing, if it was like at Tennessee or Southern Cal, we'd pack the building. So
I played there. I played there when it's packed. It's loud.
It is loud, yeah.
It's a good home court.
Yes, it is. Yeah. That's why we enjoyed it. That,
Yeah.
I've always said that. People would ask me about high school, and were there any differences? I'm like, well, field hockey, we had our own field per se, and the football team had a practice field, and then they'd play on the good field for their games. But we played, we practiced there, we played there, but I'm like, well, it's our own field. Nobody can touch it. So I it didn't bother me. as long as I was playing, that's all that mattered, so.
Well, and that's a good point though, Lisa, because prior, there are a lot of people that couldn't play before,
mhm,
like Vivian
absolutely.
Stringer, who just retired from Rutgers. There wasn't a team for her to play on in high school.
Right.
So she had to be a cheerleader. She couldn't
Mm.
play.
Yeah.
So you're exactly right. Like the opportunity to play is a result of Title IX. And, I think it's so great to appreciate that, I think.
I keep saying that to everybody that my appreciation is that I was in the right place at the right time. So.
Yeah.
Heather, is your job as athletic director, part of your title is Title IX deputy. What does that part of your job entail?
Sure. So that is, I sit on the committee and I work under the Title IX coordinator, and we work on another piece of Title IX around the interpersonal violence piece, with education, programming, and managing cases as necessary through the institution. But then I also work with the Title IX coordinator on reviewing and analyzing where we are with our gender equity compliance in athletics, and our spending, and making sure that we're transparent in our process, and that we're spending accordingly, so I work with her on that as well.
Sure. Now, every school is required to file an Equity and Athletics Disclosure Act report each year. It's a lot of numbers and stuff that I can't describe now because I read a lot of them, and it's tough.
It's
But
really
when you
confusing.
file those, Heather, do you receive feedback from the federal government, or do you guys go over with like an audit of sorts in-house, or what's it used for? Is it more of like a report card? I'm throwing a
It's
lot
a
of.
report, and it allows you to analyze. So here we do it in a cyclical manner here at UNE. So we get our budgets annually, and we plan our spending. Pretty much every dollar is planned prior to it being spent, and we do it in a really thoughtful manner. So we plan ahead. Then at the end of that cycle, you have to report every penny spent on the EADA report, which is filed with the federal government, and they check it. And so it's a checks and balances. And I know they actually read it, because my first year filing the report, I made a mistake. I just had a typo in one of my entries. And I'm sitting in my office and my phone rings, and I look over and it says EADA on the caller ID. And I was like, oh my God, what have I done? We're in trouble. And they said, these two numbers don't match, and this is supposed to be the same number, and let's go through your data. And it was just a typo. But I thought, they really do read these things. And so they really do read those things. But it is, so it's a checks and balances. But it is a complicated report, and it's tricky for sort of the layman to dive into it, because it is such a complicated report.
Right. Okay, we're getting a lot of questions through the chat and the Q&A, so I'll kind of go over some of them, and they're really for all three of you, unless otherwise stated. Let me go back to the top here. As with all laws, there is often a need for changes or updates to the legislation. Are there any changes you'd like to see made to Title IX?
That's deep.
I was gonna say, Heather, that's all you. That is all you.
Gosh. It, and this is, I don't know if this is a change necessarily, but more of a focus, a lens, is that, as Amy has said, it's not apples to apples, and I think in public perception, they want to take a basketball coach and look at a basketball coach, or they want to say, it takes X amount of dollars to outfit a women's lacrosse player in safety equipment. And then it takes a different amount of money to safely and appropriately outfit a men's lacrosse player because of their equipment differences. And so it's not apples to apples. It's equitable. There's different prices for points. It takes a lot less for a soccer team to play a game than it does a football team with the officials and And so finding that balance where we're providing an equitable and I think an excellent student athlete experience should be the marker. And sometimes I do think people get caught in the weeds of that head-to-head stuff when really it's about that experience that we're trying to build and offer for the students.
And this is not an answer to that question, so I apologize, but Heather said something that kind of got me. You know, I think that's the issue, is that every day, every week, you still see issues that are going on where that student athlete experience is not excellent. You know, we talked the other day about the NCAA tournament a couple years ago and the women's versus the men's. Like, why is that happening in 2020 or 2021, right? Like, why is it happening? I don't know, but that shouldn't be happening. You know, that being said, I mean, the men's basketball tournament brings in so much money. I mean, it's just, there's so many different factors and variables that go along with it. But the bottom line is we should be treated fairly. And I think that's the word, you know, treated fairly.
Lisa, do you remember if your Final Four was televised live?
It was.
It was?
Yeah.
Good. Because, you know, both
Back
tournaments
then,
now have been such big deals.
I want to say CBS used to televise that.
Well,
Yeah.
I don't know, Travis, if we can get that screenshot or that slide about we talking about media watching women's sports. I don't know if we have that, but that's another piece about Title IX is like female sports in the media. So that's we're talking about the number of coaches that are coaching with Title IX, but the media representation of females, you know, for the amount of females that are participating in sports, we don't see it. And I'm not talking local, I'm talking like ESPN, national news, like top 10, you hardly ever see a female, you know, sport. I think I saw something today, which was absolutely incredible. It was in 2000 and like, I think it was 2005 that ESPN took on the women's basketball tournament. And so they had it on ESPN too, but on Sports Center, there were over 100 segments that took over 3 hours. And for women's basketball, there were 11 segments that took 5 minutes.
Wow.
So, yeah. So that's what we're talking about, fairness, you know, now, and you can't, there's enough research out there that says people like women's sports. I mean, I can bombard you with research about that. So that's where we're really lagging to with this Title IX stuff.
I'm not sure if we're going to get the slide up or not, but here it is. Yeah, the 2015 Women's World Cup final.
This is from 2015.
Yeah, the ratings were better than all those events: the World Series, the NBA Finals, the Men's World Cup game, and the Men's World Cup final, and the Stanley Cup final. So, you're right. People will watch.
Yeah.
Well, in '99, women's soccer sold out the Rose Bowl.
Right.
Yeah.
Sold it out.
So, I mean, it's, you know, and that's the Tucker Center is a really great resource for anybody who is curious or wants to learn more about it. They have so much information, but a lot of this information comes from the Tucker Center. But it's just, I think that's a really, you know, because people say, well, no one likes women's sports, no one cares, no one wants to. Well, that's not true because we have research that shows. I mean, Lisa's championship game in what year, Lisa, was that? 19?
Oh, you're making me show my age. 1985. Yeah.
85.
I think a lot of these have to do with the success of the programs as well. You know, if they're not successful, people aren't going to watch them. So, you know,
well, and they
like
won't watch
the Women's
either.
World Cup, that everybody was watching that because they were successful. So.
I know
People
I'm looking
won't
forward
watch
to the
men if
college
they're
softball
not
World
successful.
Series coming up. Those are a blast to watch. So
yeah.
All right.
No one's watching the Red Sox right now.
No.
So I mean,
No, they're all watching us.
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Red Sox aren't good right now. So.
Here's a question. What is your best piece of advice to a woman looking to start a career in the sports industry?
Tell somebody. you know, I think get your name out there. When I decided I wanted to transition from coaching to administration, I went to my AD at the time and said, hey, this is what I'm thinking. And he said, hey, thanks for telling me, because now I can, you know, look for stuff. And then I was really fortunate enough we had a tremendous woman as an associate AD, and then she retired. And I ran right into his office and I said, that's my job, right? You know, but you need to tell somebody, you know, you need to tell somebody, find a mentor or someone who can help open a door for you. I wouldn't be in the chair I am now today if people didn't open doors for me along the way. And you need to tell them that you're interested.
And don't be shy about that. Don't be nervous about that. You know, like I say, email me, get in touch. Like there are people we want to help. There are people who want to help, but we don't know if you don't tell someone or you don't ask. It is a lot about relationships, you know, as is business in general, right? Like it's a lot of it's who you know, kind of, you know, but building those relationships. And I mean, I always say like too, if you want to get involved in coaching, communities are always looking for volunteers to coach, you know, helping out in high schools, helping out in rec leagues or that kind of stuff. There is always an opportunity if you want to, but you have to say something. Absolutely.
Anything to add, Lisa?
I just hope that they love the sport and love to work with the kids, because I mean, that's what it's all about, right? Making sure they're getting what they need to be successful and helping them grow. So.
Okay. Here's a question from Adam Perrin. He says, in my community in Southern Maine, there are a lot of girls playing at the youth level. Then when they get to high school or when the JV or varsity expectations are there, girls are not continuing to play. There's a struggle to have sub-varsity teams and rosters that are robust enough to strengthen programs. What are some strategies you may know of on how we can help girls stick with sports throughout their high school career? And do you know if other communities in Maine or other states are having similar issues?
I've kind of found, sorry.
No, go Lisa.
I found that like when they get to the high school, there are a lot more other opportunities if they don't really love like say basketball. There's the swim team, there's the indoor track team, they could do wrestling. So there are so many more other opportunities that they kind of branch out, you know, if they're finding that they're really not having the success that they had hoped for in basketball. So I think that there's a big difference when they get to the higher level, that there's, like I said, so many other opportunities.
And I would say too, I mean, I don't think that's specific to your community. I think that's a trend all around the country, around the state. You know, the world we live in is a lot different than it was 20 years ago. We live in a world of instant gratification where if we don't get what we want right away, we're going to quit and do something else. But that being said, I also think, and again, I'm speaking a lot about basketball because that's kind of my brain. But I also think a lot of times when we have these young all-star teams at 3rd and 4th grade, and it only has 10 kids from one community, it weeds out a lot of kids. You know, so if I'm in 3rd grade and didn't make that travel team, why am I going to keep playing basketball? You know, and so I'm done in 3rd grade. Well, I could have been really good in middle school. So I think it's a lot of, you know, that feeder program where I grew up, my dad started it. And I guess we had so many kids playing. And did they all play in high school? No, they didn't. But at least they were playing all the way through junior high and all the way through. And they weren't kind of cut off in 3rd grade, because I think that's hard. It's hard for everybody, you know. I mean, who wants to be a 3rd grader and get cut from a team? I used
no
to
room
hate
for the late bloomer in these situations.
Yeah, you know, I used to hate in middle school when like people would get cut from middle school. I'm like, come on, like let them play.
I was 4'11" on
know.
my first day of high school. I never would have been able to do anything. And then
Right?
I had a growth spurt. I still wasn't very good once I had my growth spurt. But fact is, you know, your point, I would never have gotten a fair shake because it was just, you know, picking kids when they're 8 or 9 and setting them up for their path just doesn't work out
Yeah.
every time.
No, I think that's a hard part for sure.
That's why I also think the kids need to play other sports too, especially if they're interested. I know in my high school career, I would start out in field hockey and it was like, okay, thank goodness the season's over. I can start with basketball. But even when basketball was my favorite, by the time we got to the end, I'm like, okay, I'm ready for a change, and I just think all those different sports give you different athleticism in different areas. And I think it's great that kids do try other things. I know a lot of them are like pinpointing one sport and it's like, I'm playing this year round. And I think it sometimes it hurts them.
I love recruiting multi-sport athletes.
Mhm.
Love it. Love it. It's great.
Okay, here's a question for Lisa. When did you realize after arriving at Old Dominion that you were part of a really good team and something special?
Mhm.
And what do you feel kids today need to do to get to that level?
So back when I started at the Old Dominion, before I got there was AIAW. They weren't NCAA. The first year I got to college, they turned NCAA, but Old Dominion had 2 AIAW championships before I got there with Nancy Lieberman and Donovan Ingnissen, so it was, it was crazy going there. It was like, it was a little intimidating. And getting used to a different coach, because it was like I was playing point guard and I'd pass the ball to Ann Donovan. It's like, oh yeah, just give it to her because she'll score. But then it's like, what are you doing? Shoot the ball. I'm like, oh, okay. So the next time I shot it, she's like, what are you doing? Ann's wide open. Like, what do you want from me? I mean, it was a balance. It was, trying to get used to exactly what was the best play. But for kids that, like I said, I totally agree that kids should be playing more than one sport, especially, if they're athletic and they can do other things. I found, a renewed sense of emergency of, getting back into the court when I hadn't been there for a while. It just, I think working hard, you don't need to do it year round. You just need to put in the work when you're there doing it. Again, playing other sports, you become more athletic, so they would know the answer to that if they're working hard, they know how good they can be. Some of the kids or some of the parents think they might be a little better than they're looking at the time, but
Never.
you'll know you'll know when you get there. It was an adjustment for me for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Now, do you guys think Title IX disparities are more apparent in Maine because it's hard to find opportunities to begin with due to the rural setup of the state?
I mean, I think every state has their own challenges, and so I think I think it's apparent everywhere. I think it's dependent on if people really want to take a look at it and see it, and I'm so grateful and happy we're having this discussion, and hopefully we'll have a lot of them throughout this year with it being the 50th anniversary. But I mean, it definitely creates more challenges, with us being so rural, especially when you're from northern Maine and, there's the travel and all of that kind of stuff creates a lot of hard situations. But I don't know. I think every state probably has a different issue or different challenge that makes it apparent as well.
Okay.
Yeah, agree with that.
Has having female coaches changed the way you personally approach coaching? And if yes, how?
Know if it changed the way I coached, but it gave me an example. It was someone I could see myself in. I never considered coaching as a career until I had just graduated from college and was down in grad school. I went for sport administration. I didn't totally know what I wanted to do, but I didn't think it was coaching, and then I get down there and I was thinking about a career in athletics, and I thought, well, hey, I mean, I think I can coach. And it never dawned on me in high school or earlier, and I think because I only had male coaches. And to me, that seems kind of silly, because I played sports my whole life and it was such an important piece of who I am. But it literally did not dawn on me until I played for a woman. And I thought, geez, I think I could do that. So it didn't, I don't think it changed my style. I learned from every coach I had, male, female, I took pieces of all of them, I think, and tried to then be my authentic self. So I learned from everyone, coaches I liked, coaches I didn't like. I think you get the most out of it from all coaches, but I never really saw myself as a coach until I saw another female coach and just thought, like, I think I could do this, so that's how it influenced me.
I just think that's very common. I think that's very accurate with a lot of people. Absolutely what Heather just said. Yeah.
Right. From Sarah Fuller, are there shining star examples of states, schools, high schools, colleges that do women's athletics really, really well? And what does that look like?
Oh, Sarah, that's a good question. You guys are good question.
I mean, I'd like to say UNE, but that would be my bias. But I do think, when you're looking at a school, a high school, a program, a college, you can see it. You can see it on the website coverage. You can see it in the facilities. You can see it, I think, if you put your lens on to look for it, like Lisa had said, what's the field, what's the practice field look like? Who plays on this field? Or are the uniforms, are the women wearing older uniforms and the men's team seem to have nice jazzy uniforms? I think you can, I think it when you see it. And I think if you're observant for it, I think you can notice.
Yeah, I remember being recruited by Old Dominion, and I got a program, and just the picture on the cover, it was like, I want to go here. It was amazing, and I'd never seen anything like that before. So just knowing that what they're doing for these women, and when we traveled by plane almost everywhere, unless it was, within the state, then we'd go by bus. But I didn't see any inequities with us compared to the men. And like I said, they played in their gym, we played in ours, but I didn't have any problem with it.
Here's a question that kind of goes with one we just had, but over the last few years, I've seen a decline in students participating in high school sports and choosing to work instead. Do you see this as an important issue, and should it be combated?
I mean, for me personally, I do think it's an issue. I mean, I also understand, we're in a different world than we were. So you have to work and adapt with where we're at. But the reason it's an issue for me is because I see how much sports positively impact people, and especially young girls, your self-esteem, you're just being healthy, your self-perception, psychosocial, your academic achievement, that's all research proven. It's research based. Like, especially as a young girl, being involved in sports, and it could be any sport. Look, I'm a basketball person, that's my lens, but it could be dance, gymnastics, tennis, track, soccer. I don't care what sport it is, but being involved in that sport has so many positive ramifications. And so, look, I get it. Kids have to work. I mean, I think, back in the day, I had teammates that worked in high school and also played sports. It can happen. It's not common now. I get that. I know how positive sports can impact people in general, especially young girls. And so, yeah, I hope that we continue to see, girls play.
I know for me, myself personally, I was the quietest, shyest kid in the whole school. And the only thing that brought me out of my shell was getting involved in athletics. I met people and learned to become teammates, learned to communicate and socialize. And it was my lifesaver.
Okay. Catherine Foyts, and I apologize if I mispronounce your last name, Catherine. With my last name, I try to get them right. Thank you for talking about young kids getting to play sports and not be cut at a young age. Would you please talk about providing opportunities to play different positions within the same sport? Kind of the more you can do, the more you can play.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've seen many a game where, especially in basketball, and they have one kid dribble up the ball every single time and whatever. Like, I know how that happens. I honestly, I just think playing is being a part of a team, and playing is so important. Again, it goes back to your coaches and who you have. The coaches there, are they there to make sure the kids have fun and learn the game and that kind of thing? I think you can get so many positive things about that. Look, I always wanted to be a shortstop when I played softball, but wasn't always a shortstop. I thought I should have been, it happens, I guess.
Another point too for athletics is just get out and play. It doesn't always have to be an organized game. Go out and practice in your dribbling, practice your shooting, do defensive slides. It doesn't always have to be organized, get out there and do something.
Did do that, didn't you, Lisa? You did defensive slides in your driveway.
I used to shovel my driveway to shoot baskets.
I bet you did.
I did.
And that's why you went to Old Dominion and won a national championship.
Okay. We have one question. Go ahead, Lisa.
No, I feel like, it's always, go do this AAU, go do that. Go out and play in the yard and have fun with it, Get a lot out of that as well.
Definitely. We have one last question. It's Sarah Fuller again. Have you considered training other female school personnel to coach and learn various sports or athletics, especially if they didn't have that experience when younger?
I haven't personally, but I'd like to see people that are really interested in the sport coming out. I'm surprised I haven't seen more girls that were successful in high school and gone through college and then coming back to coach. I don't feel like there's a lot of them. And I had hoped there would be. So I don't know what would get them back out.
In my role, it's a little bit different, but we do look like I'm always looking for, on the administrative side, can I give this person a new challenge to help her grow her toolbox, to help get her ready maybe for the next job or a promotion, or men too. I think it's important to give people growth opportunities. It's like that opening a door. Hey, would you like to serve on this committee? It'll get you with other different folks across campus. You'll build some relationships and build bridges. I do think you have to invite people to that process. Like, hey, I thought of you and I'd like you to try this new thing. And it helps people grow in their professions. I could see the same translating into coaching. But since I'm in the college realm, we see that with volunteer coaches. You know, sometimes a coach may be like, oh, I got this person she's a recent graduate, doesn't have much experience, but I'm gonna, you know, show her the ropes. And I think there's good opportunity for that in coaching.
Okay. It's 8 o'clock. I think that's a good spot to end. I'd like to thank the Maine Sports Hall of Fame for helping us put this on. I'd like to thank Heather, Lisa, and Amy for being a part of this panel. It was very informative and an entertaining hour. Reminder, if you like high school sports in Maine, you can check me and my colleagues out at Varsity Maine Live on Thursday nights at 8 on our Portland Press Herald Facebook page. Everyone, thanks for joining us and have a good night.
Thank you.